It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc, and if you want to contact me, you can reach me at yourpersonalbank.com, and yes, you will reach me. Again, it's yourpersonalbank.com. Today, I want to discuss something that is not common, and that is common sense. I'm not discussing politics here today, really. I'm discussing common sense. And the reason why I think this is so important is we've tried a lot of things as a country, as a government, that really don't make a lot of common sense. And, again, common sense is very uncommon, right? For example, last year, I'm going to use this as an example. The federal government received $4.4 trillion in tax revenues. What if the government lived within its means? Could we just try that for a while? Again, we've tried deficit spending for decades now, and it just keeps accelerating on itself. What if we lived within our means for once? What if we just tried it out, living within our means? That would be common sense. Now, obviously, making the transition would be difficult. Part of the reason why it'd be so difficult is, of course, because we've gone so far the other way. We've gone so far in debt, and it keeps accelerating at an accelerating rate. Currently, we're looking at the overall debt increasing at about $1 trillion every 100 days. Folks, that's incomprehensible for a lot of people. And when I share that, they're like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. They don't even realize this. But understand, it's as bad as that is, it keeps accelerating. And the problem with that is compound interest. If you understand compound interest, most people do in terms of like investing. For example, there's something called the rule of 72. Many people are familiar with, others are not. It just means that if you're earning 7.2% interest on an investment, your money will double in a decade, okay? And it's the power of compound interest. Another way to look at it is compound interest is like 1 turns to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and so on. So you can see your money accelerates. Everything accelerates. Well, here's another thing that a lot of people do not think about. Compound interest is powerful on the growth side, but it's also just as powerful in a negative way on the debt side. That is why we are accruing about $1 trillion of new debt each 100 days roughly. And a lot of that is because the interest on the debt, it just, again, keeps compounding. And here's the most important thing I think everyone needs to understand about this. It's unsustainable. If you listen to last week's show, for example, where I interviewed Sheila Weinberg, she's the founder of Truth in Accounting, she shared some sobering information and statistics regarding our debt and everything that's going on and how it's likely to affect our economy and each one of us individually, economically. And sadly, it's not good, no matter how we look at it. There is no good scenario. And the farther we keep kicking this can down the road, the worse it's going to get. Unfortunately, we as a country, and I say we the people, and here's what I want you to understand. Again, this goes back to the common sense idea. See, our government is made up of we the people. We vote in representatives, and their job is to represent we the people. Now, I know there's a lot of frustration right now from a political standpoint from a lot of people because they don't feel like they're being represented. They don't feel like their representatives are representing them. I mean, how many people out there think that giving money to illegal aliens or to foreign aid or to Ukraine wars, for example, where we have no real strategic interest as a country, how many people think that that's a good idea for our hard-earned taxpayer dollars? The money we earn and then pay on taxes just doesn't grow on the trees. Money doesn't grow on trees, right? In other words, we worked hard, we invested, we saved. It's blood, sweat, and tears that we use and apply and then give to the federal government to spend, you would hope somewhat responsibly. But of course, in this show, you've heard many times I've shared so many of the irresponsible things that our government does with the money, the wasteful stuff, the things that many people, the vast majority of Americans, do not agree with at all. And so my point is, bringing back some common sense would make a lot of sense. And again, going back to the we the people idea, why are our representatives not representing us for the most part? And the answer is because we've allowed them to. I'm as guilty as anyone else. Up to a few years ago, I would usually start paying attention to an election a couple months before it happened. Typically when the presidential elections come along, I would watch the debates and start paying attention to who was running and then decide who I wanted to vote for. I'd vote and then go back to living my life, build my business, raise my family, whatever it is I was doing at the time. That's how most Americans have lived their lives, at least through my lifetime. Of course, for me, the wake-up call was the COVID restrictions when they started shutting down small businesses. I've shared this many times on this show. And the fact is, when the government decided to start shutting down small businesses, I firmly believed then, as I do now, that our government had absolutely no constitutional right to do so. Certainly the federal government did not. States, maybe, but certainly not the federal government. And as I stated on this radio show, I'm in the studio at Money Radio 1510 AM. I stated this in Phoenix back in 2020. I think it was March or April, somewhere around there, of 2020. I stated, what is this? Are we living in Venezuela? Or is this Cuba or China or Russia? Because what right does our government have to shut down a small business? And the really ironic thing, the thing that really got under my skin, for example, I'll give you a great example. Home Depot was allowed to stay open. I could go into Home Depot and shop and get things, at least here in Arizona, all throughout the whole COVID shutdown stuff. And the reason why they were allowed to stay open was, quote unquote, they were selling essential items like cleaners and such. Of course, for a period of months, I believe about 6 months, you couldn't find a cleaner in any Home Depot I ever went into. You couldn't find wipes, you couldn't find toilet paper, you couldn't find any of those things. I'm sure you remember those days. Yet they were allowed to stay open. Unfortunately, the local hardware store didn't have the same lobbying efforts. They were forced to shut down. Why should the local hardware store be forced to shut down while Home Depot was allowed to stay open? And I'm not just picking on Home Depot itself. I could apply this across the board. But this is the type of thing I'm talking about, is a complete and total lack of common sense. So, getting back to my original thought, why do we spend more than we earn? Well, I mean, the federal government, that is. Why do they spend more than they bring in? Well, we elect representatives, like I said. The reason to represent us, but the reason why our representatives often spend more than they receive is they want to gain or maintain power. Now, elected government positions in particular, were never meant to be career positions. Our elected representative's job is to represent their constituents, not gain power. And the only reason that these representatives continue to spend more than they receive is because we allow them to do it. See, again, it goes back to common sense. I wish that politicians would realize or go back to remember why they're there. They were elected to represent we the people. Yet what I hear from them and what we see from their actions, even more importantly, is we often see them taking actions that benefit themselves personally or benefits the government in general to maintain and support the government. In other words, they have their own agendas, and they often have their own agendas because they want to line their own pockets, make more money, it's beneficial to themselves, or as it's openly stated, they might be blackmailed or bribed. Now think about that a minute. We had a country for decades, centuries even, that was fairly free of corruption. Now, I'm not saying there was no corruption. Of course there was. But in comparison, if you want to compare our government, our system, our society, for the past couple hundred years even, compared to most other countries, we were far freer of corruption and things like that than most other countries of the world. What has changed? Why are we, the people, allowing our representatives to do their own thing, pursue their own agenda, rather than represent us and our agenda, the things that are important to us as Americans? Why are we allowing it? We've been asleep at the wheel, as I've stated before, and people are waking up, and I appreciate that. I think that's great. That's awesome. Thomas Jefferson himself stated that a prerequisite to democracy is an educated electorate. We can no longer stand by or stand back, kind of pick who we want to vote for, and then go back to our lives and live our lives, because unfortunately, we have a number of people, elected and otherwise, in powers of position that have taken advantage of our neglect. They've taken advantage of our lack of paying attention to what's going on, and they've congregated, so to speak, into those positions to gain their own benefit, to pursue their own agendas. I don't know about you. Are you sick and tired of hearing politicians tell us what they think we should do or what's important for our country? I know I am. It's not their job to tell us what they think we should do. It's their job to do what we think they should do, or what we, the people, think is important. We, the people, have the power in this country. We, the people, need to take back that power and send a message to Washington, to Congress, to our government, and let them know that we, the people, are in power, we are in charge, and you're going to listen to us or we're going to replace you. Think about this a minute. This is a thought I've been sharing with people that has gotten a lot of attention. This fall in November, 435 representatives are going to be up for re-election. What if they were all replaced? We could do that. What kind of message do you think that would send? It'd be seismic. It'd be like an earthquake. Now, to be fair, personally, I'd like to see anyone who supports deficit spending, anyone who supports open borders, and anyone who supports wars like Ukraine to be replaced. By the way, that would account for about 75% of all our current representatives. Pretty much all the Democrats, because they vote as a bloc together for the most part, and about half the Republicans are often known as the rhinos. Let's get rid of 3/4 of them. Folks, that's probably unrealistic. What if we got rid of half? What if we got rid of a couple hundred or even 100 of them? The Tea Party revolution, I believe, replaced about 70 or 80 representatives, and that was seismic. We can do it again. Now, I'm going to encourage you to contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or toll-free 866-268-4422. Again, yourpersonalbank.com. If you want more information on how to thrive through this economic challenges that we're facing this year, and I believe likely in the next few years, contact me for more information on how to thrive. I will share some more information with you in this show, how to thrive rather than just survive. Are you concerned about the direction our country is headed and how it may affect your money? I'm Ferenc, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. Your Personal Bank provides a place to grow your money safely with guarantees, tax-free, and highly liquid. This keeps your money safe, and you can take advantage of opportunities regardless of the economic situation. For more information, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or 866-268-4422. That's yourpersonalbank.com.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc, and if you want to reach out to me, you can contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me, yourpersonalbank.com. Do you want to bring back common sense? You want to stop excess spending of our federal government? Well, it's really quite simple. If your representative votes for deficit spending, vote for someone who promises to reduce spending. That would start to bring back common sense. Now, hopefully they would follow through, this new person, but if not, replace them the next time they're up for re-election. Now, what is deficit spending? For those of you who don't know, it's the government spending more than it receives. This is what causes and creates inflation, which we all have to deal with. Now, the thing is about politicians, and I believe it was Thomas Sowell that probably said it best. He said, politicians have three priorities, three things that are important. Number one, they want to get elected. Number two, they want to be reelected. And number three, all other priorities fall far below priority 1 and 2. And I believe he's absolutely right. Again, how do we get these politicians, these elected representatives, to listen to us, we the people? Stop spending all our money. Stop spending us into financial oblivion. They're going to push us over a financial cliff if we don't stop them. How do we get them to do that? We replace them. Folks, you're not going to change the attitude. You're not going to change the direction or the focus or whatever of the ones that are there now that are voting continuously, consistently for deficit spending. They have their own ideas. They have their own agendas. They may be compromised either through threats or bribery. Folks, this is an open secret. This is not some conspiracy theory, because I've even heard certain representatives, for example, discuss how the FBI and CIA and such use threats of intimidation, bribery, whatever, to get what they want from our representatives, get their vote or get their voting card. How ridiculous is that? How obnoxious is that? As we, the people, vote in a representative to represent us, we vote for them based on the things that their positions that they take, the promises they make to us on how they're going to represent us. And then when they get to Washington, they get threatened, they get bribed, whatever, and they change their tune. A perfect example is our current speaker, Johnson. He states he's a strong Christian. He states that he has a biblical worldview when he first got there. Yet, if you look at his voting track record now so far, he votes far more like a Democrat than a conservative by any means, and certainly not a biblical worldview. For one, from a money standpoint, the Bible discusses how the debtor is a slave to the lender. The debt is bad. Yet, Speaker Johnson continues to pass and support legislation that includes spending that includes everything the Democrats want, their wish list even, so to speak. Things like, for example, if Speaker Johnson was truly a strong Christian, why would he support and vote for spending that, pays for abortion clinics, for example, Planned Parenthood, etc.? That goes against his biblical worldview, yet he does that. Now, I don't know Speaker Johnson. I can't say for sure why he's doing what he's doing. But it does beg the question that he either is using his Christianity, wearing it on his sleeve as sort of a badge to gain favor, from Christians and other faith-believing people. So he's using that, and that's sad if he is. Or he's a very weak Christian at best, that he just doesn't understand what the Bible and biblical worldview really is about. Or third option is he's compromised somehow. He's been threatened or bribed to do the will of the deep state or the will of the establishment or the Democrats or whatever you want to call them. Again, when we have a representative that promises one thing, that says he's not going to allow any Ukraine funding until our border is secure. That's what Speaker Johnson stated repeatedly when he first became Speaker. Then turns around and does the exact opposite. Well, that means he is lying to us or has lied for whatever reason. He needs to be replaced. He needs to be replaced by someone who promises to represent the people, who promises not to spend too much money, more than they receive at least, who promises to close the border, who promises not to support Ukraine and follows through. Once they promise and then follow through, then they should be allowed to stay in office. Otherwise, they need to be replaced. Again, if we, the people, use that as a very simple, clear standard, then they would get the message and politicians would listen and they would actually start representing us. Folks, that's the solution. We have to be educated. We have to understand that we cannot listen to what a politician says. We have to see what they do. If they vote accordingly, they can stay. If they vote against the will of the people, to the benefit of Americans, and vote in favor of the benefit to themselves or the government or whatever, they need to be replaced. If they recognize that is the case, things will change. Let's touch on this about excess government spending. The thing is, and it's increasing, as I stated in the first segment, exponentially, it's unsustainable. The problem we have is with inflation is, first of all, excess government spending is one of the number one causes of inflation. Everything costs more. Now, we've been hearing from the Biden administration how inflation is down. That is incorrect. That is not true. The truth is the rate of inflation has decreased. In other words, it's not going up as fast as it was, say, a year or two ago, where we hit peak numbers, I believe around June, July of 2022, of around 9%, according to the government's numbers. Remember, we discussed in previous shows that if the government counted inflation as it did back in the 1970s, inflation for 2022 wouldn't have hit about 8 or 9%, but would have been 18%, folks. Those are the real numbers. But despite the fact, let's get back to the main point here, is that inflation rate has decreased. So notice the rate of increase has decreased. Now, what do I mean by that? The bottom line is the prices of things has not gone down. They're continuing to go up. In fact, the latest numbers, I believe, were at about 3.5% inflation, which was higher than most experts, quote unquote, were expecting. I'm not surprised. Just look around. If you go to a grocery store or a gas station, you know what inflation is. If you are trying to buy a home or a property or anything like that, you understand inflation. My point is simple, is it's about double what the Federal Reserve's target rate of is about 2%. In other words, the rate of increase of goods and services is about twice the level, roughly, of what the Federal Reserve states is a good idea. Now, that's another whole discussion I'm going to get to in a minute. Let me give you another example. Food prices have increased 25% over the past 3 years. This is according to the U.S. Labor Department. And if they increase, this is a fact, they've increased roughly 25% over the last 3 years. You add another 3.5% to that, you're now at 28, 29%, aren't you? In other words, every increase that occurs each month, each year, is a compound effect. It's adding on top of what the increases were previously. So here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if the rate of inflation increase has slowed. Prices are still going up. They're just not going up as fast as they were before. This is insidious. This is horrible for the typical American. You see, politicians like inflation. And why? Well, it's a silent tax. It erodes your buying power, but it benefits somebody who's the government, who's a large debtor. You see, it hurts the middle class and lower income people the most because a higher percentage of their income goes to basic necessities like food and transportation costs. That's the bottom line. Why the politicians like it is they don't have to raise taxes, so to speak, to have an increase in revenues, okay? And if they're borrowing a lot of money, then they can pay it back when they pay back interest on it on future dollars that are worth less because they've reduced the borrowing power. Now, this gets us into a whole different discussion about the Federal Reserve and their target rates and all this type of thing, because my question is quite simple. The Federal Reserve states that 2% inflation is their target. Well, whoever said 2% annual inflation is good for the average American? It's not. Now, it's not as insidious as 3 or 4 or 5 or more, obviously. But the reality is it does require, even at a 2% inflation rate, for someone to have more and more money just to live, because the buying power of the dollars you earn steadily decrease. So unless you have an increasing income, by the way, if you have a 2% inflation rate, which again, the Fed claims as a good, I do not. It means you have to increase your income 2% every year just to mark time, just to break even. You're not getting ahead, you're just breaking even. Now, if somebody's income is increasing, okay, that's fine. But what about those that are retired, people on fixed income, various things like that, that do not have an ability anymore of increasing their income? Well, over time, gradually, their financial situation deteriorates to the point that they have to make significant reductions in expenses, lifestyle, all of those types of things. It's one of those things we discuss all the time is, are you going to run out of money before you run out of time? When inflation is higher, that becomes an even bigger issue. And I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment because I'm going to discuss a couple of situations that have occurred with just recently, in fact, with clients that are now starting to see the real crunch in retirement, for example. And a lot of it is because of inflation. The increasing in cost has hurt their financial situation. I will be able to give you some solutions to that. Your personal bank, by the way, can be one of them. Your personal bank can be an inflation hedge, if you will, and a tax hedge. And I'm really going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment so I can share with you some more on how that works. So don't miss it. Are you prepared if we fail to avoid a recession? I'm Ferenc, host of the Your Personal Bank Show. Most of the leading economic indicators show we are headed for recession. Your personal bank earns dividends with guarantees, tax-free, and highly liquid. This protects you from the downside risk and allows you to take advantage of opportunities in a changing economy. For more info, contact me at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc, and if you want to reach out to me, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. Again, it's yourpersonalbank.com. Been discussing a lot of things about common sense today. And the thing we need to understand is there has been truly a lack of common sense, and particularly with our federal policies, our government policies, and a lot of it has to do with excess spending. And of course, the excess spending is creating high inflation. Now, I get asked this a lot because we keep hearing that, Fed's going to reduce rates. I do not believe that's the case at this point. And why do I say that? It's not me saying that. It's the Federal Reserve. If you listen to the Federal Reserve and what they're stating, they've been stating consistently now for well over a year, higher for longer. The reason why they're saying interest rates are going to stay higher for longer is quite simple. The number one cause of inflation is excess government spending. The government has to sell bonds when they spend excess dollars. They can't just print the money willy-nilly and just put it out in circulation. They have to sell bonds against the currency. That is the current law. When they sell the bonds on the markets, somebody has to buy those bonds. The bond buyers typically are large institutional investors, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, insurance companies, outfits like that. To get these institutional buyers to buy the bonds from the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department sells these bonds. They have to offer an interest rate. The Treasury Department sells Treasury bonds at certain time frames. You can get all types of time frames from months to up to 30 years. Treasury bonds. It's a set rate of interest that the government pays the buyer. For example, recently there was an auction for 10-year Treasuries. So in other words, anyone who wanted to buy, there was an auction to purchase however much treasuries, and they were offering an interest rate to buy those. Of course, the situation in the recent auctions has become more perilous as time has gone forward because the federal government is spending more and more money every year. Again, it's accelerating, plus the interest on it is accelerating. Therefore, the government has to sell more bonds. If you understand Economics 101, you understand supply and demand. If you have excess supply, if you have a lot of supply of something, the price of that item tends to go down. Or in the case of treasury bonds, where the federal government is trying to sell record amounts of treasury bonds, they have to offer a higher interest rate to the buyers to entice them to buy them. Also, as they continue selling more and more, the risk to the buyer increases because as inflation continues, the interests are going to get paid in the future is worth less. Therefore, the bond buyers demand and require a higher interest rate or they do not buy. Well, when the interest rates, when the demand is, or there's so much supply that the demand is weakening, then you have real problems because then the government can't spend the extra money, can they? Well, we're starting to see this in the last couple of auctions, and particularly the most recent 10-year Treasury. It went very, very poorly. In other words, they sold what they could at the highest interest rate the Treasury was willing to offer, and they couldn't sell the rest. It is not a good sign. What does that mean? The bond buyers either just don't want to buy anymore, we're seeing some of that, or they feel like the risk of future inflation is too great, so they don't want to put their money there, or there's just too much of it. There's just too much supply. And when the bond buyers balk, when they will not buy those bonds, eventually what will happen is the federal government will be forced into austerity measures, which means they will be forced to live within their means. Now, again, the federal government's not broke. I'm not a doomsdayer here. Austerity measures actually should not be feared, frankly. It should be embraced, in my opinion. If our federal government had to live within its means, that would mean all federal spending would be cut by approximately 40% across the board, everything. Now, some people would say, oh my gosh, that would create economic chaos. Well, for a period of time, it would be very chaotic, absolutely. But it would also shake out the excess debt, the excess problems, and it would put the federal government in a better financial position. Understand, folks, this is something you and I have to do as individuals, as businesses, or whatever, with our finances. We cannot indefinitely continue to spend more than we receive. Otherwise, we are faced with major financial decisions. Many of you listening to me at some point in your life had to make significant changes in your financial spending, your habits, your expenses, due to reductions of income, sometimes through your own cause, sometimes outside of your, it happened despite, it could have been the economy, a job loss, a business loss, health issues. Stuff happens out of your control. That's life. We learn to deal with it. Is it traumatic when it happens? Is it stressful? Absolutely. Is it create some economic chaos? No question. But when you look back on those situations, I can tell you the vast majority, myself included, and I deal with this with people every day, we learn tremendous lessons from those experiences. We don't learn from our successes, we learn from our failures. We learn valuable lessons that help make us who we are. It makes us stronger if we learn from it and get better and stronger and wiser rather than weaker. Our federal government is very weak. Our leadership is very weak. They are looking at their own benefits, or they're, like I said, compromise in some way, rather than looking out for the better of the country. Most of them, again, anyone who votes for excess spending needs to be replaced. Now, I started to mention, because inflation, here's the thing, inflation is going to continue, and higher interest rates, particularly with bonds, are going to continue as long as the federal government continues to spend more than it receives. In fact, a recent Vanguard article even echoed the same thing, where they predicted bond interest rates to be increasing for the next 5 to 10 years. We could see a situation where bond interest rates and the Federal Reserve rates could deviate some. Even if the Fed started to lower rates for some reason, I think that's very foolish at this point. But let's say they did, bond interest rates would likely continue to stay strong because of the excess supply of treasury bonds if no other reason, because of the excess spending. Well, again, the federal government's financial irresponsibility creates an opportunity. I don't want you to miss this. There is a tremendous opportunity ahead of us. And like this opportunity isn't going to come and go, it's going to be here likely for the next 5 to 10 years, perhaps even longer. Again, until we get this federal spending reined in, or it's forced to be reined in by the bond buyers because they just don't want to buy any more bonds, we will have strong interest rates, strong bond returns. Now, you can buy bonds directly, but that requires there's limitations and things like that involved. Or you can get them through investment where they are heavily invested in bonds and highly interest rate sensitive. Your personal bank fits into that very, very well. Annuities also do that. The insurance industry in general are a big part of the institutional investors that invest in these bonds and are highly interest rate sensitive. Your personal bank policies have been paying about 6% dividends, insured, guaranteed, income tax-free, federal and state. We set it up correctly, and you can pass on to your heirs, by the way, tax-free. Don't miss that. Insured, guaranteed, tax-free. And they've been paying 6% even with the low interest rate environment we have for the past decade. Every company's telling us the same thing. The profits are up. The interest rates are up. Dividends are going up. The historical average is 7 to 8%. If we stay in a strong interest rate environment because of the push of selling all these treasuries to keep pushing interest rates up with bonds, we could see something higher than that. To give you an example, like in the interview I did last week with Sheila Weinberg, founder of Truth in Accounting, she predicts we are likely headed into more of a hyperinflation scenario. If we end up in something like the night we saw in the 1970s, for example, if we see double-digit interest rates, these dividends will be paying double digits. If we go back in history, in the 70s, these dividends on these policies was paying 12 and 14%. Again, insured, guaranteed, tax-free. Look, if we end up in a situation which I cannot see any way out of unless the government significantly changes its tune on spending, and it's not going to do that until we, the people, change who the representatives are. Until that happens, why not take advantage of the opportunity? Certainly there's more risk out there today in investing. I know this is a fast-moving topic, but the Middle East, there's increasing likelihood of war occurring over there. This could become very ugly, very fast. Interest rates, inflation, those things all threaten the economy. Taxes, all these things have an impact on the future economy of this country. The stock market has been at or all-time near highs recently. When's the time to sell a asset? You know, the old rule, buy low, sell high. Look, no one knows what's going to happen with the stock market, when it's going to peak out, when it's going to correct, and nobody knows how long, how far. But wouldn't it make prudent sense to start taking some of the winnings off the table? I understand there's some taxes involved to do that oftentimes, but doesn't it make sense when you have winnings, you take them off the table? By the way, with the current tax laws, that's one other thought I'll touch on. Under the current tax laws, many people do not have capital gains because of their income tax situation. If, depending on who is reelected into office this next year, who's going to be in charge of the House and Senate, that could change dramatically the capital gains tax situation. Right now, we know what it is, and it's at a very low level historically, and a lot of people have no capital gain tax because if they sell stocks or other assets right now because of their income tax situation and the way the current tax laws work. Why not, if you have some winnings, cash them out? That's what people do in Vegas. That's what wise gamblers do. Wise investors do the same. And you pay the taxes on it when there's minimal or low tax rates. Lock it into some tax-free, guaranteed, insured, highly liquid. Your personal bank does all of that. and can become a inflation hedge because it's highly interest rate sensitive. So if interest rates continue to stay high, guess what? Your personal bank could likely become the best investment that you own. Stay tuned in the last segment. I got a few more things I want to share with you. I'm certain you do not want to miss. When people contact me, they often ask, what exactly do you do? And yes, if you contact me, I, Ferenc, host of the Your Personal Bank Show, will respond, not an assistant. I help people increase their returns, reduce taxes, increase positive cash flow, and reduce market risk. I accomplish your goals using various financial tools, including your personal bank. If you have questions or would like to discuss your situation, contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. Want more information? Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ferenc Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. If you want to contact me, you can reach me at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, if you contact me, you will reach me, yourpersonalbank.com. Today we've been discussing a lot about common sense. It's really not politics that I'm applying here. It's common sense. Currently, pretty much all of the Democrats and about half of the Republicans, the rhinos, routinely support excess spending. In other words, they support spending more than the government receives, or deficit spending. Now, this, of course, contributes big time to inflation, which we all pay for. It's a hidden tax, folks. Whether you pay taxes or not doesn't matter. Whether you support the government or not doesn't matter, because you eat food, you wear clothes, and you live somewhere. And the costs of all these kinds of things continue to go up as the government continues to spend more money. We've discussed this in this show and many others previously. And by the way, if you want to listen to this or any other previously recorded show, go to yourpersonalbank.com. You can scroll down. There are literally years of shows there with topics, anything that interests you. Check it out. I think you'll find it very educational. Again, that's yourpersonalbank.com. Right now, like I said, currently pretty much all the Democrats, half the Republicans, the rhinos, routinely and consistently support excess spending. If we, the people, replaced those rhinos, and maybe even a few of the Democrats, excess spending would stop, financial sanity would return, and common sense would prevail. You see, folks, we don't have to replace all the representatives. All of them are up for re-election in November. All 435 representatives in the House of Representatives are up for re-election. What if we got rid of most of the rhinos? What if we got rid of some of the Democrats and we actually had a conservative majority in terms of fiscally conservative, or better said, fiscally responsible? That's what I want to see. I want to see fiscal responsibility come back. I want to see common sense come back. I want to see common sense and fiscal responsibility prevail. See, I watched a documentary recently on Norway. Now, I'm sure Norway's got its problems and issues like any other country, but what I find ironic and frustrating in many ways is how Norway has handled much of their natural resources. You know, if you go back early in the century and last century, they had tremendous lumber resources and easy access because of all their fjords and their rivers. And then later, hydroelectric power. They, in fact, supply something like 95% of their electric needs as a country through dams and hydroelectric because they're uniquely suited for that. Then oil was discovered, and they have invested heavily in that and offering oil and natural gas, just like many other countries. But here's the difference. They took some of the profits from that and they put it into something called the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And they've been investing in that for the benefit of Norwegian citizens. Currently, that wealth fund is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, apparently. And last numbers I saw, something like worth $275,000 per Norwegian citizen. See, that is it, and I'm sure there's been some corruption and there's been some people involved that have tried to take advantage of that system. I'm certain of that. But the reality is, overall, in general, the government of Norway has represented their people and taken the people's interests at heart, and they have taken the people, they've looked out for their own citizens. Wouldn't it be, and we, the United States, think about this a minute. What kind of politicians and leaders do we tend to have, especially right now? They're always telling us what they think we should do. They're always looking out and voting for what's best interest of them. I mean, this latest FISA thing, for example, they were passing it, and that's where the FISA thing is where these FBI and CIA and all can spy on U.S. citizens without a warrant. I mean, that's against the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, for example. But why would a federal agency, security agency of any kind, why is it so difficult to ask for a warrant before they spy on a U.S. citizen? But no, our own representatives can't seem to vote for that. And of course, that's a fast-moving position. It may change. But my point is, the fact that it's even an issue frustrates me. And on top of all that, of course, Congress exempted themselves from it, as they do many things. They exempt themselves from many of the things that they vote for the American people. One simple change would be maybe it needs to be a constitutional amendment, but anything that Congress votes for, any law, needs to apply to them equally also. That would be a simple, common sense solution. That's what the type of thing we need. But here's what frustrates me so much. The Norwegian government has done things, and the representatives, to look out for their own people, and they have done a rather remarkable job of that. The United States has far more natural resources than Norway. The U.S. is far more wealthy in every respect you can think of than Norway. Yet our government has about $35 trillion of debt that they claim, and has something like about $160 trillion in unfunded promises. The Norwegian government has a sovereign wealth fund where every citizen has $275,000 of money to their benefit in this sovereign wealth fund. That's a massive difference, and it's a common sense thing. Again, civil service should not be for you or a representative they should not benefit. In fact, these people that come into office, how many times have we seen that where they were not worth much and then they become multi-millionaires? Every single one of those should be audited, and if anything nefarious is going on, they should be convicted of whatever laws they have broken. They should not be allowed to stock trade, for example, as members of Congress and such, where they have inside information on laws and things that can affect these businesses. Again, it's become a system of where they get in and then they become wealthy, look out for their own best interests and not ours. Let's look at the borders. What about open borders? Let's use some common sense. Does anyone think open borders is good for our country? Obviously, the answer is no. Who do open borders benefit? The cartels, drug dealers, human traffickers. That's the type of people it benefits, and anyone who is involved with that or gets a benefit from that. That's it. It's not good for the American citizen. It's the fact if anyone supports that, in my opinion, they have broken their oath of office to support and defend the Constitution, and they should be replaced. Certainly they should be impeached or replaced. And if they won't force the issue legally, we the people need to do so. See, allowing millions of unvetted illegals will lead to the destruction of our society and our country. Increased crime is just one of the results. Also, we, the people, are paying for their food, housing, healthcare, legal services, and flights for illegal immigrants. This all contributes to the excess spending that I was discussing earlier. Why should our hard-earned tax dollars that we work hard for, we invest, whatever, however we made our money, and then pay to the federal government, why should that go to support illegal activity? Currently, an illegal immigrant is breaking federal law. Why should why should any benefit be available to them? And on top of that, why should we be paying for it? And here's one last one I want to share. One last common sense thing. Oh, by the way, if we the people consistently replace politicians that refuse to close the border, the politicians will get the message and common sense will return. Let me share with you the last thing. Everyone used to hate war. It's destructive. It costs a lot of money. People die. It's horrible. Yet we now have elected representatives and bureaucrats who consistently support war. The Democrats, almost to a person, and half the Republicans, the rhinos, consistently want to send more funding to Ukraine, for example. The border's wide open. What's their response? Send money to Ukraine. Inflation is high. What is their response? Send more money to Ukraine. It doesn't matter what the issue is. They are a one-trick pony. Now, look who wins when there's war. The military-industrial complex. George Washington warned against getting involved in foreign entanglements in his farewell address. Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex in his farewell address also. You see, folks, there's no money in peace. And defense contractors make big money building weapons, and many elected representatives and bureaucrats benefit from defense contractors, their campaign donations, board seats, all that type of thing. Folks, it's all about money. It's all about power. It's all about control. When we see a representative supporting war, people die. Yesterday, I was at a memorial. It's the Wall That Heals. It's a replica of the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial. If you have ever been to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, it's on the plaza in D.C. It is an emotional experience. It's powerfully sad. It's powerfully tragic. Over 58,000 names are on that wall, and those people died for what reason? There's a lot of people who were against the war, who benefited from the Vietnam War, for example. Well, the defense contractors did. Those that supported them and received campaign donations and things like that certainly did. How did it affect those people, the names on the walls, plus all their loved ones that were affected? How many more? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, frankly, because every one of those names on the wall represented a brother or a sister or a son or a child that their life was affected forever because of that war. Yet some people made money. Folks, we need to wake up. We need to figure out why our representatives vote the way they do. And if it's not for our benefit, if they vote to spend more than they earn, than the government receives, if they vote to keep the border open, if they vote to have no voter ID so people can cheat on elections, that, by the way, dilutes your vote. Everyone should be in favor of that. If they vote for endless wars, replace them, please, for your sake, for my sake, and for future generations. For all of our sakes, please replace them. If you want to contact me on how to navigate all this chaotic situation, I believe we're in for a chaotic year. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But if you want to have safe, guaranteed, insured, tax-free, highly liquid money that's likely going to increase in returns so you can weather this storm, and guess what? Take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves, because they will. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. And as always, as long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
Contact Ferenc at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422.